Welcome to Caribbean Connections, Caribbean Airlines Thought Leadership Series, where we sit and chat with leaders from across the region to get the inside scoop of how they have achieved success and to provide a platform so they can share their perspective on issues impacting the Caribbean and the world. I am Dion Legore, the head of corporate communications at Caribbean Airlines, and I am delighted to host this series of conversations. Hello, and welcome to Caribbean Connections. I am Dion Legore, the head of corporate communications. Today, we have the pleasure of chatting with Mr. Colin Soo Ping Chow. He has over 35 years of accounting, auditing, and financial services experience and has served large corporate clients in the Caribbean from a senior advisory capacity. His clients include large public and private sector companies in a variety of industries, as well as publicly listed and regulated entities. Mr. Soo Ping Chow is also a fellow of the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants of the United Kingdom. He is a practicing member and a former president of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. Soo Ping Chow, it is our pleasure to welcome you to Caribbean Connections.
Good afternoon, Dion. I'm very happy to be here today with you, having this discussion with you over the next 15 to 20 minutes.
Yeah, the pleasure is all mine. So we'll get right into it. You know, you've been a partner with EY Caribbean since 1990, and you were appointed executive chairman in 2004. With over 35 years of professional experience, what are some of the successful traits or pitfalls that you have seen in Caribbean companies?
Let me start off, Dion, by saying that it's really been an honor for me to work with clients across the Caribbean. I've been able to work at close quarters with many companies and with many leaders. And it has really been a very enjoyable personal and professional experience. From my experience, I've seen a lot of businesses enjoy tremendous success. And some of the traits that I've seen, if I can highlight it to you this afternoon, is, first of all, I think it's not an either-or situation. You know, no business is infallible. Businesses go through many cycles. Invariably, they go up and down, right? For example, very few businesses are going to be able to sidestep a pandemic. So many businesses would have gone through very difficult times at that point in time. But in terms of the traits that I would like to highlight, I've seen some really exceptional leadership. I've seen people that bring really unique capabilities to the market. They bring a high level of operational proficiency into the business. So they are, on the one hand, very demanding people, but on the other hand, they're very aspirational and very disciplined. They're not easily distracted. So they understand their priorities in the business. And therefore, when there's a beehive of activities taking place, when there are 1,000 things that could be distracting individuals or businesses, they really, the best leaders that I've worked with, stay very focused on their priorities.
Indeed, and you would have somewhat of a bird's eye view, having worked closely with some very large companies here in the region. As we speak of the region, there is a long-running debate that Caribbean integration could perhaps benefit from a single currency, as, for example, is the case in the EU, and from a common stock exchange. What are your thoughts on these ideas?
To be very frank and honest with you, I think the concept of a single currency is a very complicated undertaking. And I'm not sure that at this point in time, it's the right thing for us to be able to do. CARICOM is really made up of a number of small fragmented markets. And regional integration is really intended to support economic and social development. But from my perspective and my experience, I think integration goes beyond new rules, new regulations, and new laws, right? And I think when we talk about integration, we have to get into the debate around alignment. There's going to have to be give and take, right? Among the islands, from a political perspective, from a regulatory perspective, there'll be a change in status quo for sure. If the islands get together and decide to integrate in a much more substantive manner, there will be shared interests. There will be new structures. The point that I'm making is there's no silver bullet for regional integration. It's hard work and there are a lot of complexities. So I think in summary, I would say that the Caribbean Stock Exchange is something that I support. It's part of the puzzle, but I think it's time for us to refresh, to really develop a clear picture and really identify a few meaningful initiatives that we can execute. I would like us to make integration more of a reality than a discussion, in summary. Thank you.
How do you see the future of business leadership evolving in the region? And what are the imperatives during a period of unprecedented turmoil, which we've seen since 2020?
I'll say a couple of things. I'm not sure that I can easily predict the future of the region, but I would say that I am optimistic about the leadership qualities that I've seen in the region. The last 2 years has been very difficult in the region. I would say that no business school could have predicted this sort of confluence of events. No business school could prepare leaders for this type of volatility coming in a number of different directions. So when I look at the leaders across the region, and this is my sort of analysis of it, I see the leaders having gone through 3 major phases of development over the last 2 years. As I said, it's been very, very brief, but very, very, it's a short period with a lot of change taking place. So the first phase I saw taking place during the shutdown is, I would call it the survival phase, when many leaders got their heads down and were focused on cash flows and preservation of capital. We need to get through the shutdown. And the second phase is where I saw leaders maturing, including myself, right? So this is not, I'm not talking from a pulpit, right? When they were starting to think about deeper transformational changes in the business, outsourcing services, right? Thinking about efficiencies in a much more transformational manner, thinking about new delivery sales channels, right? Thinking about technology differently. And the third phase that I see taking place in the region at this point in time, and again, I'm making reference to leadership, is they have changed their mindset and they're starting to reposition for growth. So when I look across the region, I see many leaders who have come through this very difficult period over the last 2 to 3 years, right? I see them looking very closely at their business portfolios, looking at their product mix, looking towards mergers and acquisitions. In a number of cases, they're also looking to do divestments. They are changing their business models, which is something that's pretty interesting to me, where you begin to see businesses, in some cases, they may be competitors, in some cases, they may be complementary to each other, really establishing partnerships in order to drive incremental value in each other's business, right? But I think the next 5 years will undoubtedly be a challenging period. If I had to look at it through a crystal ball and make a best guess at this point in time, I would say I would expect a lot of volatility. I think the geopolitical situation will not settle down completely, and I think it will dominate the agenda.
Coming out of the pandemic, as you've said, no one could predict it, but where I see the invaluable lessons that we have learned is that we now have some sort of blueprint, an emerging blueprint, because it's not perfect. It is we're all still learning, because this pandemic has stages. We're not yet out of it, but our resilience through this, and we now have to sort of rethink the way that we do business, looking for synergies, really looking to take bold steps where perhaps we may have been more conservative before. You have played a pivotal role in the successful integration of EY Caribbean firms. How would you describe the importance of teamwork and collaboration across cultures that may at times diverge?
I would say that leaders thrive when they're surrounded by great talent, right? I would also indicate again at the very beginning that teamwork, collaboration, or as I would describe it as culture, is the glue in the organization. It is the aspect that makes the organization really keep moving forward, regardless of the obstacles and the roadblocks that may exist, right? And what I would also add is that teamwork and collaboration are not just soft skills, it's about trust and respect. And it's displayed in many small ways that you have to be very conscious about. For example, communicating, the way that you communicate with a senior executive should be very similar to the way that you communicate with somebody at the lowest end of the ladder. The way that you treat people with respect, people from different backgrounds, regardless of nationality, gender, race, right? So I think these attributes are attributes that are inherent in teamwork and collaboration. These attributes are learned and are not necessarily part of everybody's DNA. But believe me, when people see it, they understand it.
There are many dimensions to business, and even with these dimensions, there are multiple layers. But certainly, you've touched on some of the fundamentals, trust and respect, because those human qualities really go a long way in building organizations, and which are inherently built on relationships. And a relationship built on trust and respect has a tendency to grow and flourish. One of the major focal points of global businesses, we hear terms being used like sustainability, which is a significant focal point. We are hearing ESG, environmental, social, and governance ideas. Can you share perspectives on how Caribbean companies are creating long-term sustainability?
There are no international reporting standards to define exactly what is meant by sustainability reporting, right? And those standards and models and frameworks become very important because you want to have some level of comparability from organization A to organization B. And when an organization sets a target that they want to be carbon neutral by a particular date, implicitly, it assumes that you are collecting the right data, you're tracking the right data, you're measuring the right data, right? And it is something that is going to be your approach and your methodology and your framework is going to be consistently applied so that investors, regulators, and stakeholders can understand what is being reported. So I just want to make that comment that it's in the boardroom, right? It is being, the organizations are looking at it seriously, but we are very much at the early stages of this process. This is going to become, from my perspective, however, more and more important. And at some stage in the not too distant future, we begin to guide capital allocations and financing decisions, right? So when people are thinking about making new investments or expanding in a particular way, they will be thinking about the environmental impact of it, of those decisions. They will be thinking about the social impact of those decisions. And they will be thinking about how does that impact their overall objectives and targets in this space. I think we are still about 2 to 3 years away from global standards. I also believe, Dion, that the war and the very high energy prices, right, may impact the pace with which this is being adopted across the board and across the world, so that the move towards renewables has become very important. But oil and gas would certainly not be replaced over the next decade or two. So the current environment is one that will impact all governments, will impact all citizens, and it will have some impact on the whole concept of ESG and sustainability. In summary, I believe from a Caribbean perspective, as the corporate world gets into this area, I think the time is now. I think we have an excellent opportunity for governments, for communities and for the business sector to work together. I don't think this is a entity by entity objective. I think there should be some discussions taking place at the national level. And I think organizations and chambers and associations should be thinking about how they can get the community involved in these activities and how they can work with other organizations in the region in order to be able to move forward.
Yes, indeed. So, for example, here in Trinidad and Tobago, we have SwimCall as one of those agencies, and see where they have a campaign of Get Into Green. And behind all of that, what we're seeing is really a movement towards a shift in our thinking away from perhaps the short-term gain toward long-term investment and sustainability, with a view of the next generation in mind, and being very cognizant of that with every decision that we make. Thank you, Mr. Soo Ping Chow, for chatting with us today. It really has been a pleasure hearing your insight into these issues that are important to and impacting our region. The pleasure has certainly been ours.
Dion, it has been my honor and pleasure to be able to chat with you this afternoon and to be able to share some perspectives. I hope that these perspectives would resonate with the individuals who may listen in on it. And I'm happy to be able to work closely with Caribbean Airlines at this point in time, our regional airline. And one of the topics that we've talked about is regional integration. So thank you very much.
The pleasure is ours. Keep safe and well, Mr. Soo Ping Chow.
Thank you.
Thank you to our viewing audience. We'd love to get your feedback, so please send it to corpcom@caribbean-airlines.com. That email address, corpcom@caribbean-airlines.com. You may follow our social media channels, LinkedIn, TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at iFlyCaribbean. I am Dion Lego, and this has been Caribbean Connections.